The bus to Cotopaxi took about 2 hours, passing by some stunning scenery on the way. We checked in at Cuscungo hostel and then just chilled out and had dinner before bed. The next day we still felt pretty exhausted, but it was tough because we'd booked a trip to go to Cotopaxi National Park. We were picked up by our driver and then it took about 40 minutes to get there, witnessing some absolute scenes along the way. We headed towards Cotopaxi volcano and drove up as high as we could, and then it was time to start the walk. We knew we weren't hiking to the top of the volcano, but we didn't realise quite how high we were going to walk. The car dropped us off at 4,500 metres above sea level. Bearing in mind, this time yesterday we were in Quito, which is 2,850 metres above sea level, and this time 2 days ago we were in the Galapagos, which was at sea level, so we had definitely not acclimatised properly prior to this walk. And boy did we feel it. My lungs felt as though I'd just done a really heavy cardio workout, and it felt like you couldn't catch your breath properly. But despite this, we managed to get up to 5,080 metres. 80 metres more than what we should have done, which my lungs did not appreciate. And just to put this into perspective, Ben Nevis, the highest point in the UK, is 1,345 metres, and Everest Base Camp is 5,364 metres. So we were only 284 metres below that. So after we reached that point, it was time to head back towards the refuge hut, while attempting to navigate the dodgy terrain, and failing miserably, multiple times. We then warmed up with a hot chocolate in the refuge, with this sink demonstrating just how cold it was, and then headed back to the car so we could catch our breath again. We then drove a little bit further into the national park, and the driver dropped us off at Laguna de Limpio Pungo, which was this stunning lagoon, and couldn't have looked more Ecuadorian if it tried. And then after about another hour of walking here, we headed back to the car and then back to the accommodation. The whole of the next day was just spent chilling out and doing a bit of uni work, ready to move on again the next day. We walked to the main road and flagged down the first bus we saw, and luckily it was going exactly where we wanted to go, which was a town called Baños. We arrived bang on time for check-in and stayed at Hostel Timara, which was bang in the centre.
We dropped our bags off and headed straight into town to have a look around. Starting off in the town's main square, which had this beautiful church and lots of pigeons. Then took a 5-minute walk over to Cascada de la Virgen, which was a 150 metre high waterfall right next to the city centre, where the cold water was channelled into the local hot springs, along with all these basins where people used to do their washing. Then we headed over to the city's main bridge to watch some people have a go on this ginormous rope swing. Then we took in the views of the canyon, which included these waterfalls which looked like they were coming out of the back of people's houses. Then we finished our trip around the town with a visit to La Aldea Magica, which was described as a sculpture garden showcasing both local and international artists. But within the first 20 seconds we realised we'd just paid $4 each to go into someone's back garden, and it was just a weird selection of sculptures and garden gnomes that they'd collected over a long time, and displayed them randomly in the bushes. That evening we went back into town and finished the day with a lovely steak dinner.
The next morning we decided to get on a public bus and try and find some of the bigger waterfalls in Baños. Baños is short for Baños de Agua Santa, which literally means baths of holy water, which refers to the numerous natural thermal hot springs around the area. The first waterfall we went to was actually outside of Baños in a small town called Rio Verde, and this one was called El Pailón del Diablo, which is one of Ecuador's most famous waterfalls. It drops roughly 80 metres into a deep canyon carved by the Rio Verde, and the name of this waterfall translates to the Devil's Cauldron due to the swirling pool at the base and the devil-like face shaped formed by surrounding rocks. You can either go and view the waterfall from the bottom or from the top, and we decided to do both. This is what it looks like from the bottom. Apparently it's not normally this crazy, but because it's wet season it's going wild. Here we attempted to go underneath, but quickly realised that was a bad idea. We then came out, had a walk up the road so we could see it from the top side. And if you're wondering, yes, it was raining for the entire trip to Baños. But to be honest, we didn't mind because it was a welcome change. Now we thought the bottom section was cool, but the top section was even better. They had loads of hanging bridges dotted around, with insane views of the waterfalls at every angle. And what was probably the best thing about this place was that it had a little platform directly underneath the waterfall, so you really got to see the full power of it. And there's me running next to it, and this is what it was like up close. After this we headed back into town, grabbed some lunch and then got on a bus to the next waterfall, Cascada Agoyan. But what Jack had failed to mention was that it would involve a dodgy cable car across the waterfall. Again, a reminder, I don't like heights. And what made it worse was that it was powered by parts of an old truck. It just looked like it had been thrown together. But as dodgy as it was, I will say it was a pretty cool experience, and the views over the top were great, although I did spend the entire time just holding on for dear life, while Jack showed zero sympathy. The next day Jack did uni work, while I was in bed with food poisoning. Again.
Ignoring Beth's weak stomach, we woke up the next day and continued our journey on to Cuenca. We had some dodgy jellies on the bus, and then took in the delightful smells of the man behind us, who farted constantly throughout the whole journey. After 8 hours of constant flatulence, we had weaved our way through the Andes Mountains and arrived at the bus station, where we took a tram through to our accommodation hotel check-in, which was very central and very basic. And after dropping our bags, we had a wander through town, which had some fantastic architecture and over 109 churches. We found ourselves a restaurant and treated ourselves to a pizza, and as always we ordered too much food and went to bed very full. The next morning we woke up and got ready. At this point I realised I'd bought a few too many green clothes for the trip. After I was done dressing as a cucumber, we had a wander into town to grab a coffee, where we got to hear the beautiful sounds of Cuenca. We then spent the rest of the day exploring Cuenca's parks and rivers.
The next day was our last full day in Cuenca, and we kicked it off with a walking tour, starting in Plaza de los Geranios, where a bunch of priests used to live. Then we came here to Corte Superior de Justicia, which, as you can probably guess, means Superior Court of Justice. We then visited Plaza de las Flores, which is one of the top 10 flower markets in the world. Then we tried a drink called Agua de Pitimas, which is made by the nuns who live in the church behind, and apparently it calms anxiety and relieves spiritual stress. Then we went to the biggest market in the city, where you could get absolutely anything, and then stumbled on a cheese and meat restaurant, so obviously had to indulge, because 5 months is too long without proper cheese. After this we took a trip to the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception, which is one of the largest cathedrals in Latin America. They built most of it and then realised that they can't ever finish it, because the structural design can't actually hold any more weight, especially with the risk of earthquakes in the area. And materials from the church are sourced from all over the world. The blue domes are made from tiles from Czechoslovakia, the altar is made of marble from Italy, and the pink volcanic stone is from the Andes, just to name a few. Then that night it was time to leave Ecuador, so after feeding some stray dogs at the bus station, we got on our night bus and headed on our first leg of the journey, stocked up with snacks and ready for the next 12-hour ride, and this time we were driving through a mountain range, from Cuenca to Chiclayo in Peru, during which we obviously stopped at the border to get our passports stamped, and where we got to see the secret accommodation for the second driver, which was just a mattress in a baggage compartment. Not sure how safe that is, but anything goes over here.
I'll sit it!